Let's now move to the last segment of this summit and today's session. And in introducing this last segment, I would like us to watch a short video that is going to be reflecting the highlights of the 30 years of Nedlac. If we can please play the video, thank you.
The birth of South Africa's democracy in 1994 ushered in a new era of hope for the country, and with it, plans on how to fast-track socio-economic development to the benefit of all. The National Economic Development and Labour Council was established in February 1995 to play a crucial role in shaping the nation's socio-economic landscape, and since its development has become an apex institution of social dialogue in South Africa. The Nedlac Act, passed by Parliament in 1994, set forth our mission: to promote economic growth, to ensure participation in economic decision-making, and enhance social equity. Nedlac is entrusted with the critical task of reviewing all proposed labour legislation and significant changes to the socio-economic policies before they are introduced in Parliament. As one of the first institutions formed after the 1994 elections, a great amount of hope and trust was put in Nedlac. Drawing on international best practices and lessons learned from the National Economic Forum and the National Manpower Commission, Nedlac brought together government, labour, business and community organisations to drive the participation of key stakeholders in decision-making on socio-economic issues. Over the past 3 decades, Nedlac has hosted several impactful summits, including the Presidential Jobs Summit in 1998 and 2018, the Financial Sector Summit in 2002, the Growth and Development Summit in 2003, and the Labour Relations Indaba in 2014. These events have focused on fostering collaboration and consensus building to address some of the country's most pressing challenges: unemployment, lack of inclusive economic growth and financial exclusion, poor wages and the working conditions facing many workers. Nedlac has played a crucial role in shaping labour market legislation that includes the Labour Relations Act, Basic Conditions of Employment Act, Employment Equity Act, Skills Development Act, National Minimum Wage Act, Unemployment Insurance Act, and associated codes and regulations. Through extensive negotiations between organised business, labour and government, legislation has been aligned with the rights enshrined in our Constitution and with international labour standards, reversing the exploitation faced by workers prior to democracy. Nedlac has also given birth to social partner bodies that promote dispute resolution and social dialogue, such as the Commission for Conciliation, Mediation and Arbitration, Proudly South African, and National Minimum Wage Commission. In times of challenge, Nedlac has brought parties together to respond to crises, ranging from the electricity crisis to the COVID-19 pandemic, amongst numerous others. The Temporary Employee Relief Scheme, launched during the COVID-19 pandemic, provided income support to millions, while the Social Compact, created to support Eskom, committed all social partners to ensure energy security in the country. Through social compacts and rapid response task teams, the social partners at Nedlac have assisted in finding solutions that benefit all South Africans. We ask that you join us in celebrating 30 years of Nedlac, a testament to what can be achieved when we collaborate in the common interest of a more inclusive and equitable South Africa. We particularly acknowledge past leaders from all 4 Nedlac constituencies who have worked tirelessly to advance social dialogue to achieve a better South Africa. We look forward to the years ahead, trusting that current and future leaders will continue carrying the batons passed on to them by our previous leaders of business, community, government, and labor. Let the good work of the past 30 years urge us to come together as we continue to shape a brighter future for all South Africans. Thank you. Dankie. Enkosi. Ngiyabonga. Realebua. Keleboha holo. Nzankensa. Ke itumetse. Rolevua.
Wow. It doesn't always feel like it, but I think we've really come a long way as a country, and Nedlac has been very instrumental in all our achievements. I'd like to now invite the following former overall conveners who will be giving messages of support to Nedlac in the celebration of the 30 years of Nedlac, and if they can please come to the stage as I call their names. Professor Raymond Parsons, the overall convener of business, or former overall convener of business. Ms. Lula Manare, former overall convener of community. Mr. Les Kettledas, former overall convener of government. And Mr. Begin Jalinjali, former overall convener of labor. Thank you very much. So we are now going to receive the messages of support from the former overall conveners, who will only do their messages in just 5 minutes. And we are going to start with the former overall convener of business, Professor Raymond Parsons, who was the overall convener of organized business from 1998 to 2009. He was the Deputy CEO of BUSA and is currently a professor at the NWU School of Business and Governance. Professor Raymond Parsons, if you can please take the podium.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity and the privilege of sharing a few thoughts, all protocols observed, for today. I don't think I can compress 30 years into 5 minutes, but I'll try. I think it's wonderful to be here today to see both old and new friends who are involved in Nedlac. And I would say that I think you must very much accept that the old guard is part of the vanguard of Nedlac. I think as the apex social institution of dialogue in South Africa, we're not only celebrating today, we're also contemplating where we are, the past, the present, and the future of Nedlac, as we've seen in some of the earlier remarks. Of course, over the years, and I've experienced it, so have my colleagues and my comrades here, that there have been great successes for Nedlac, which we've seen. We also know where there have been the identified failures, that it has not met what we had hoped. But this, in a sense, I think, is a reflection of the recent history of South Africa, that the ups and downs of our young democracy, some of the crises we've experienced, these have resonated within Nedlac itself. And I recall that my predecessor, by the way, I was overall convener from 1996 onwards, not 1998. My predecessor was someone called Bobby Gotzel, whom you know, and he's often said, referred to the extent to which South Africa over the years has often looked close to the edge of the abyss, but has always pulled back in time, always found the solutions. And that's, I think, been very much what Nedlac has also done from time to time. Sometimes it's got into a crisis, it looked over the edge, and it's pulled back. It's that the social partners have found each other. So I think if one looks at it on balance over time, that Nedlac's role, that its role is not to govern the country, but I think, as you've seen from what you've heard today, it has played a major role in helping to keep the country governable. And I would suspect that if Nedlac had not been co-founded at the time of our democracy, we would have had to invent it anyway. But in the time available, I just want to make 3 important points as part of my own message. The first is to refer to the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who once wrote that we in South Africa so often sell ourselves short, unquote. And he was referring to the largely peaceful transition which we had in 1994 to the democracy that we now enjoy. And it was to also remind us that the Nedlac legislation of November, I recall it very clearly, of November 1994, was one of the first pieces of legislation to be passed by the Democratic Parliament. And Nedlac was seen as providing over the years the socio-economic dimensions to the reconciliation and the nation building to which the new democracy was being committed. And I think the important point that I want to make is that as we review our past, our present, and the future in particular, that Nedlac's social dialogue role and its successes should not be sold short. And the failures, we must learn the lessons of those. The second point is looking through the prism of our socio-economic priorities, which we've heard about today. I think it's very important, as one thinks back, what are the lessons we've learned about our mandate as an organization, the leadership of the organization, and I think, as has been indicated, as big a job as we have discharged over the past 30 years, there lies a huge job ahead for Nedlac, for its social partners, and for government. And we've heard today also that there are plans to restructure and adjust the operation of Nedlac. It's quite clear, coming back to that well-known phrase, given the challenges we've identified, Nedlac has to be fit for purpose in the next few years, given these particular challenges. And the 2 most ingredients that are part of that, the 2 pillars on which making Nedlac fit for purpose would be, firstly, to be proactive and to be relevant. The third point I want to make briefly today, there's been much reference both outside and inside Nedlac about the need for a comprehensive social compact. I would say simply that, to me, reflecting on what Nedlac can offer, that a combination of the emergence of the Government of National Unity, to which reference has been made, to the Declaration of Intent, and in particular the updated National Development Plan, it should be creating space now for what I call, or what others have called, social compacting. Please note the plural. This is a house of many dimensions, and I think Nedlac remains the appropriate structure to find the common ground that you need in order to base successful social compacting. So to conclude, let me offer best wishes for Nedlac, for the future, to succeed, Nedlac and its social partners and its new participants that may join later. We must be relentlessly optimistic about the prospects for changing South Africa, but remain brutally realistic about the challenges that remain, that have been identified today, and how effective social dialogue can help to find and implement the solutions. Perhaps the best attitude, Chair, that has been summed up, given the challenges, given the institutions we want to have, like Nedlac, to succeed, a prominent historian once identified what he thought was the one key cross-cutting characteristic that shaped the fortunes of nations and institutions over many, many years. And I'm going to quote, because I think it's important that we leave today, having heard what we've heard, and will hear after I've spoken, where we go from here with the right mindset in tackling the challenges and the resources at our disposal. And he said this: in this world, the optimists have it, not because they are always right, but because they are positive. Even when wrong, they are positive. That is the way of achievement, correction, improvement, and success, of which we heard so much today. Educated, eyes-open optimism pays. That pessimism can only offer you the empty consolation of being right. So my message today is, let's tackle these challenges that have been identified, build on the achievements, learn the lessons of the failure, and ensure that effective social dialogue will make the necessary difference to the future of South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much to Professor Raymond Parsons. And now, Ms. Lulama Nare will be giving us her messages of support. She was the overall convener for the community from 2009 to 2012. She has served on a number of public and community-based boards, such as the Council at the Tshwane University of Technology and the Eastern Cape Rural Development Agency. Ms. Lulama Nare, if you can please come to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you, Program Director. To the Honorable Minister Math, she's my former boss. I was her board chairperson in the ECRDA. I believe she appointed me to be the chair for the next 3 years in that board. So here you are. You gained a very productive, active, capable leader in Comrade Math. I just wanted us to refocus maybe and reframe a bit. Don't worry, I'm a bit charismatic. My favorite music is rap, so. There's one thing that is always the elephant in the room, especially for South Africans. And I always want us to acknowledge it. Colonialization of a special type. Apartheid was colonialization of a special type. Because it identifies, it was very strategic. It took a lot from each South African to make it successful. It was institutionalized. It lies here in this room. It breathes. I breathe it. It smells. Congratulations to the government of national unity. I felt the stench. I woke up one day and with floodlights like these ones, I didn't know what was happening. The next thing, my dad is gone, the house is ransacked, and it's in the middle, if not the early mornings. And I'm not talking about 1946 or 1956. I'm talking about the 70s and the 80s when I was a teenager, which means some of us in South Africa, in this room and across the country, multiracially, we were part of the regime. My age group, if you're looking at me and you identify yourself as my age group, one of you chased me. I was on riot. You chased me with your baton. I look at you every day. You a young boy. That's the stench. It's the skeleton in the room of the South African history. So when you see community and you don't see the need to put them in the labor market chamber, you must know you're part of the stench because you don't understand that we belong everywhere. Just like we don't understand that women belong everywhere. Just like we don't understand if a person is on wheelchair, that he can still think. If he's blind, he can still, he's an intellectual, just like you. So Reserve Bank made some research and it's widely circulated. Business Times prints it, and then I see a cartoon from our own political cartoonist celebrating load shedding. I don't know how many days, but for me, officially, I'm 48 hours without load shedding. Literally 48 hours. So my son this morning woke up at 4 a.m. and said, okay, I'm going back to my routine. He's studying. 4 a.m. he was there sitting because there's electricity. It started in April. I have never enjoyed your days. So Zapiro is sitting there with the light, and I'm thinking, Zapiro, I'm not sitting with the light here. I'm sitting with the burden of unmaintained infrastructure. But I benefit from that infrastructure because I moved to a certain area. Because of apartheid, I don't know what is infrastructure. Because I didn't have. This floodlight flashed there because it was looking for my dad. It's dark in the township. They had to drag him out. We all are crying, we're busy. This was their infrastructure because it was dark in the township. So we don't understand what is infrastructure. And that is why we understand it better when you include us in the labor market chamber. And I'm calling for Nedlac. Your chambers, the community belongs in your chambers. Not because, you see, sometimes we mistaken this thing of being a community. I'm a qualified teacher. For a decade, I was teaching economics and business studies. For a decade, when you land there, Gqeberha, look for my school there, it's Warmer Heights, still producing top. So when you look at community, don't look at them and say, oh, maybe he's coming from a shack, he's just cold. You can see he's poor. No, these are intellectuals. They belong everywhere you are. Because when you are sitting as elites, you need to be reminded, because elites are not a homogeneous group. I'm not talking about white elites. I'm talking about South Africans who are elite, who walk into rooms and forget their communities they come from. That is why they will never develop the infrastructure. And then when the communities think about it, they say, okay, we're going to take the cable and we're going to have lights here. Because the elites, despite the fact that we are not a homogeneous group, when you sit there in those rooms in the different chambers, you agree. And then when you are given that chain to reign there, you forget that you are coming from that community that you still need to serve. So all of a sudden, we must petition you to eradicate the toilet. We must petition you to understand what is a two-pot system. I saw the long queues, And I said to myself, these people, the only thing they want right now is survival. That is why they are taking their money in their lifetime. It's in their lifetime. Those workers that I saw there, they have families. Kosatu, you had a research on one worker. How many do they support? One working person in a family, how many people do they support? So don't come to us. That's why we didn't go to vote, some of us. Don't say to us, you're going to offer us one job for a family. It's already been existing for a long time, for decades, because every person depends on that person who's working. That is why they were there in long queues in that two-pot, taking that small money just to make sure that they can alleviate the pressure that the high costs are bringing. So as I conclude, thank you, community constituency. For you not to think that you are less than. Qhubani. Masiqhubeni. And bawuva ba uthini umasiqhubeni, there's a problem. You are not a South African. Umasiqhubeni, let's all go forward, united. But let's be aware that we are not a homogeneous group, that we are not going to say one thing. That is why it's going to be deeper, your social dialogue. That is why it's conflictual. That's why it takes years. Because you can't take 5 minutes to understand my struggle. And then you say, no, let's go, we're done now. No. Get into my shoes. And then use your empathetic understanding to understand where I'm coming from. And then put back your elite shoe and say, okay, as an elite, this is how I'm going to drive this. To my former community constituency, Mr. Shezi, so glad to see you. Mam Laura, thank you for being my mentor. The first time I met her was Soli Mapaila. He said to me when he first saw me, he said, okay, you can't represent women, you must go and meet one woman there in the town, in the middle of the CBD in Johannesburg. And that's the first time. I met Mam Laura 20 years ago. She's part of my furniture. I think I'm also part of her furniture. Thank you very much, Mam Laura, for mentoring me. To my fellow overall conveners, Geduldas, I think my dad has something to say about your history. Thank you for seeing you. It's just one of those things. I know I interrupted him. When I came here, I was told to sit, I was supposed to sit close to you, Prof. But I wanted him to say something because I know he's gonna say something. So I just sat there and he really passed and said, why are you? I'm like, I choose. I'm sitting here. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Liz. And well done. Aspeke Pambi. All of us. Bev?
Nyabonga, sis. Thank you so much. Thanks, sister. Nyabonga. Thank you so much for that message of support from Ms. Lula Manare. And now we move on. We now move on to the message of support from the former overall convener of government, Mr. Les Kettledas. Let's settle down, colleagues. Let's settle down. We have 20 minutes before we conclude the program. So Mr. Les Kettledas was the overall convener for government from 2008 to 2013. He has served as the NUMSA's National Secretary for Collective Bargaining, as well as the Deputy Director General in the Department of Labor for many years. Mr. Les Kettledas, please come and take the podium.
Well, thank you very much, Program Director, Honorable Minister, my Minister. Although I'm not in the department anymore, you're still my Minister now. His Excellency Deputy President Paul Mashatile, in his recorded address today to us, the ministers and other government leaders that are here, all protocols observed. I'm honored today to join in celebrating the past 30 years of Nedlac, of which 19 years of which I've spent in the structures of Nedlac. Guided by the time given to us by the program director, let me zoom into 3 areas. The genesis or evolution of Nedlac, highlights or reflections on the road Nedlac has traveled over the last 30 years, some thoughts on the future ahead, and Nedlac's role. Upon the democracy in our country in 1994, the first Minister of Labour, Tito Mboweni, led a tripartite delegation to the 81st session of the International Labour Conference in Geneva. This event marked the 75th anniversary of the creation of the ILO and 50 years of the adoption of the historic Declaration of Philadelphia in 1944. It was at this historic occasion that South Africa was being readmitted to the ILO after 30 years of absence because of its apartheid policies. Inspired by the significance of the event, Minister Mboweni remarked that as the 31st session of the conference charted its course, and I quote, "We in South Africa are mapping our own. The ILO principles of tripartism, social responsibility, and social justice are our compass," close quote. When we returned to the country with Minister Mbowene's leadership, we proceeded with a flurry of activities that led to the institutionalization of tripartism in our country. Indeed, in establishing Nedlac, we went a step further, ensuring that organizations of community and development interests are also formally and equally involved, as we can see today. In the Nedlac founding declaration, the social partners identified 3 defining challenges facing the country to be, firstly, sustainable economic growth, secondly, greater social equity, and thirdly, increased participation by all major stakeholders in economic decision-making. Unfortunately, 30 years later, these challenges remain with us. For a variety of reasons, though, it is not for the lack of effort on the part of social partners represented at Nedlac. It is commendable that most, if not all, significant socio-economic legislation has passed through the Nedlac structures over the years. And here I wish to extend appreciation and gratitude to the ministers and the conveners that served in those various chambers and at the other structures of Nedlac. The lead departments, Department of Trade and Industry, today known as DTIC, Public Works, Finance and Labor, and the individual conveners that were responsible for the trade and industry development, the Public Finance and Monetary Policy Chamber and the Labor Chambers respectively. These chambers are the engine room of Nedlac. This is where the hard work is done, where tough negotiations take place, tough discussions take place. And the role of the lead departments was crucial, and the conveners of those departments, as they played an important role in internalizing also the work of Nedlac in their departments and indeed in government. As we tabled and considered socio-economic policy with our social partners, the discussions were sometimes robust and debates often fierce. But where deadlocks occurred, Another mechanism in Nedlac was called into action, and that was a committee of principals. And I think the committee of principals have a critical role to play in the affairs of Nedlac. And they are always ready to step in and assist in dispute resolution amongst the social partners. As we review Nedlac's achievements or challenges over the past 30 years and its future role, I think it's also incumbent upon us to give attention to the wider dissemination of Nedlac work at the provincial and local government levels. Promoting or fostering social dialogue at the subnational level could support more effective policy formulation and implementation, thus leading to improved development outcomes in our country. Nedlac has not been a waste of time or resources, as some distractors may say. It is heartening to see reports showing that the satisfaction of stakeholders in the work of Nedlac averages 73%, and I think it was 78% on the slide. On the future of Nedlac going forward, I fully agree with the sentiments shared by others that we need Nedlac to continue to succeed in these uncertain and difficult times. The structures, including the chambers, the management committee, the executive council, need to be strongly capacitated. The Nedlac conveners need to be properly mandated. It's so essential in those chambers that conveners and delegations of social partners come to those discussions in the chambers as mandated representatives. Similarly, the committee of principals also need to continue to play a role in unblocking difficulties, logjams, or resolving disputes where they arise. Fortunately, the social partners have seen to it that there are moves to make Nedlac a fit-for-purpose entity that is also agile. And a number of speakers had raised the issue also. I wish to join in congratulating and acknowledge the progress made on the revised Nedlac Bill, the Constitution, and protocol for considering issues at Nedlac. In conclusion, I wish to pay tribute to the government leaders over the past years. These include the former presidents and deputy presidents who addressed and chaired the Nedlac annual summits. And I see now there will be a slight amendment that the deputy president that was always supposed to chair the Nedlac summits, that will now change. But they will always be called upon to address the Nedlac summits. I wish to thank the lead ministers and government representatives who engaged the work of Nedlac and supported it in its approach to deliver on its mandate. I also wish to thank the overall conveners of the social partners for the role they have played in steering Nedlac, Professor Parsons, Ms. Nare, and Becky, former Minister of DTI, Ibrahim Patel, was also an overall convener. The success of Nedlac over these past 30 years would not have been achieved without the industrious and hardworking secretariat under the different executive directors. I know that the secretariat, the coordinators from the secretariat in the chambers were critical in the work of those chambers. And many of them have over the years put in very hard work with difficult social partners sometimes to make those chambers function successfully. And it's because of you that today we're able to truly celebrate the countless efforts to turn the dream of social dialogue in our participatory democracy into a concrete reality. And with that, I thank you very much, and I wish Nedlac prosperous next 30 years forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Les Kettledas. Now let's receive our final message of support from the overall convener of organized business, Mr. Begin Chalinchali, who was the convener. So now, we are going to receive our our last message of support from the former overall convener of organized labor. He is business, he's at ESCOM, so that is business, and he's doing a very good job. He has managed to end load shedding. He was the former overall convener for organized labor from 2009 to 2023, and during these periods, he was the Deputy General Secretary and Deputy General Secretary of COSATU and General Secretary of COSATU at that period, Mr. Begin Chalinchali. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Program Director. You are not alone in misrepresenting who I am. When I went to the ILO for the last time, I was listed under business. So maybe that's where the future lies. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Let me pass my greetings to the ministers and Minister of Labor, the Deputy President and the ILO Director, all protocols observed. I was wondering as to why it was me to speak on behalf of former overall conveners. But I understood now that maybe they wanted to allow those who came second, because I look at Prof, he was not the first, and I look at Lulama, she was not the first, and etc. as it goes on from business, not it was the same, not the original ones. I must say that things have changed, looking to where Nedlac is. In the first Nedlac summit that we had, business was almost all white. And I look at them today, they are almost all, yeah, you can see. And the same with government, that all your support staff ministers are now our members. So sometimes when you prepare something and you keep it a secret, we know before you deliver it, because our members are the one who types all these messages. So that's our contribution. So even in community, as they have some gripe, and you can hear from them, they said they are gatekeepers, but we deploy Comrade Lulama, who was a member of SACTO at that time, to say, go to this community that seems to be problematic in their complaint, to be in all chambers. But we also said we must send Pat Horn to look after them. That's why she's sitting in here. So in all these constituencies, you'll have the print of labor. But all the overall, all the executive directors of Nedlac are coming from the trade unions. So when you appreciate the good work, remember, these are the workers that we are donating to them. And we're also giving some ministers to say ministers must come from labor, and we can then give other ministers to business. But 30 years of unbroken services of shaping and reshaping the social dialogue in itself is a milestone. The Nedlac records speak for itself. So I'm not going to say what Nedlac has achieved over the 30 years. Books have been written, libraries, you go to library, you'll find the work of the Nedlac. Even in social media, you can just click there and set Nedlac. It will just emerge how Nedlac has worked over the last 30 years. So it speaks volumes in terms of what we have done. In fact, many countries envy Nedlac. They are here, they are learning, they are coming to Nedlac. Most countries in Africa comes here to learn about social dialogue, being the last in achieving the freedom, but being the first in terms of social dialogue, and we fully understand that one. I must hasten to say, though, that in the invitation that I received, we were told we were going to speak for 3 minutes. So I thought, what will I say in the 3 minutes? Because it's impossible to speak about Nedlac achievement in 3 minutes. So I thought just the best thing is to recognize those I think that have made contribution in the embryonic stage, in the infant and the teething stage of Nedlac, ranging from the President Mandela, John Komomo, Tito Mboweni, and David Brink, who signed that Nedlac agreement. Going to Boki Porter, business will remember Boki Porter, Leslie Boyd, Patrice Muzipe, Semu Zwenyane, Godsell, Lambert, Andre, Bazi Mashilowa, Cunningham, Ngugana, Herbert Mkize, Enoch Kotongwane, Khalima, and I'm mentioning Khalima as the president. He was serving in our chambers. Many of these people, Enoch Kotongwane, the Minister of Finance, was serving in the chamber in Nedlac. Philip Dexter, Les, oh, by the way, Les Mkalipi, we deploy. You can see where we strategically deploy these people. Tony Ehrenreich, Zwelinzima Vav, and Ibrahim. If time allows, I will tell them story about them. But seeing that we don't have time, I just want to mention 3 groups in passing that we, in many times when we celebrate, we don't talk about them. The first group is the general worker in Nedlac, those that clean Nedlac, those that provide us tea, those that make transport to fetch us in the airport. When we talk about the achievement, we don't speak to them, about them. The second one is about the support staff of the constituencies, those that they may call, that they ensure that there's a quorum, that copies are made, and venues are reserved. The third one is the one that I belong to, the overall conveners, the invisible hand of the overall conveners. In many instances, you will not know what they've been achieved, their contributions. Now, we regard them to be the oil in the engine, that if the engine has to kick in all cylinders, there's a work that is done by the invisible hands, which I term them the overall conveners. Now, we were asked to say, what advice could you give to the future overall conveners? And I'm not talking about the current one. I'm talking about the future. The first thing is that the overall convener respect one another. They're coming from different constituencies, but they respect one another. Secondly, they respect the position of other constituencies, no matter how it sounds disastrous, ridiculous, and all those issues. They respect it. They will tell you in the passage with I Maringatini better. But they will respect it and treat it because they understood that there's a mandate. What you are coming up with, you got a constituencies that says you must present those issues. But they also understand, overall conveners, that the fight in the chambers, in the boardrooms, in the task teams remains there. You fight in the meeting, sometimes the temperature is high, you come out of that meeting, you are smiling, and you still call yourselves comrades, and you are able to talk as human beings. But more important about the overall conveners is the commitment to find a solution. Whenever they negotiate, they know that the work that they have to produce has to advise either a certain minister or a cabinet. So they got a commitment to produce an outcome that is sound, that got quality in dealing with those things. But lastly also, that every argument and proposal they have to make must be supported by research, facts, and evidence. So that's how they have managed these 30 years. Even somebody talk about a consensus. They had a consensus to agree, but they also had a consensus to disagree. They disagree among themselves, but with respect, even on issue they don't see eye to eye. Now, without them, my argument, and without the solid overall conveners, Nedlac will not be where it is. I just, in conclusion, to make few things that the overall conveners agitated to their leaders. The first one is now a very unpopular one. The overall conveners decided and make a recommendation that there should be no sitting allowance in Nedlac. All other structures in a country, there's a sitting allowance, and you can see that people don't miss a meeting because there's a sitting allowance. There's no sitting allowance in Nedlac. All of you here, you are not going to get anything for coming, but your commitment. So there's no sitting allowance. That's the first proposal they make, which was then accepted by their leaders. The second achievement for me by the contribution and the guidance of the overall conveners was the preparation and outcomes of the Growth and Development Summit. If less you'll remember, TM was the president and he wanted the outcome. Prof, you know, and the office of TM, I think there's no president that his staff is so afraid of the president. TM was one of that president. And they keep calling Dex and says, why are the conclusion? The president wants to have conclusion. And one of the last 2 days, we end up the meeting 2 a.m. in the morning. EP was in Geneva. I tried to call him. Hey, EP, he was nowhere to be found. And people were crying, and Dexter was saying, Labour, please agree. And we said, no, can't agree on this thing. But eventually we agree. Growth and Development Summit. The third one was the South African response to the global financial crisis. Normally, big business says they don't have time. But when the crisis of finances was there, captain of the industry, directors were available to meet and say, let's meet. We can't have these things. Khalima was the president at that time. The overall conveners pushed them. You have to come to the meeting. This was work that was done, if I'm not mistaken, in 2 weeks, 10 days. We produced a response to the global financial crisis. The importance of that agreement is what led to what in the ILO was called a jobs pact. It's a South African initiative. It ended up in the ILO, and it was termed the jobs pact. The fourth one was the national minimum wage, which was one of the call in the Freedom Charter, 1955. This was driven by the deputy president at that time, then the president now. And we normally said we don't have time, particular people from business and government. They said they have no time. The deputy president said we are going to create time. If the deputy president can have time, it means minister will have time and business will have time. We're meeting in Nedlac after hours, but we're even meeting on a weekend, if people will remember. Deputy President meeting on Saturday, 9 o'clock, everybody will be there, we're there. A very difficult negotiation. I remember at one time, the Labour person walked out of the meeting in Pretoria. Kalipi calls me and said, hey, your reps here has walked out of the meeting. And you must come. And said, can I send somebody? He says, no, come yourself. Nobody to deploy in here. Good achievement. The rapid COVID-19 response was one, in my view, where Nedlac really did a good work. They were meeting almost 24/7, of course not the whole day and night, but whenever they were called, they were available. When they were resisting, it was the overall convener who said, you must go. You cannot make yourself unavailable. And the economic reconstruction and recovery plan was one of the achievements that we have made in Nedlac. But the one that I like most, and I like this because sometimes there are contradictions, is about the labor courts. The candidate judges are recommended in the main through the JSC by the overall conveners. They shortlist who should be the judge. They engage before even the interview, and they agree with the labor court judge president who should be the judges. And I'm mentioning this because sometimes the judges make a decision that is not in your favor, and people start swearing at this judge. And you said, oh God, but this judge was nominated by us. This is our judge as the overall conveners in that case. But not everything was good, and we took a decision, Prof, to establish the minimum labor council, because government was becoming a little bit problematic, and EP and Prof said, no, can we establish something where we can speak alone without government? So we established the Millennium Labor Council. In my conclusion to this future overall conveners is normally this quote, I don't know who wrote it, that rivers never go back, reverse. So you must live like a river, forget the past, focus on the future, and always be positive. But to the Nedlac overall, Nedlac executive, who, by the way, I will not now tell who is coming from because you might have an attitude to her when she puts some suggestion, but it's obvious where she might be coming from, is that do what is right, not what is easy, and not what is popular. Thank you very much.
Thank you.